questions?
Uh, Chris, so far we've heard a lot of position changes, and
Yep.
especially a lot of guys at Sam linebacker. I know there's three guys there right now. What has stood out to you about those guys, and what's the kind of learning curve learning that position, which is kind of a hybrid?
Well, the first thing that I've noticed from those guys is something that you really appreciate as a coach is that they've embraced the change. They've embraced the opportunity really to develop and really add value to the defense because of what they bring to the table, particularly for that position. So, the learning curve it's a little bit different. The value that they have, I think, is their intellect. All three of them are pretty smart players, and they also, all three of them have played in space a ton, and so they're just a little bit closer to the box. The action happens just a little bit faster, but because of their experience playing where they played previously, I think it adds tremendous value.
We've heard a lot of DJ Harvey at Nickelback. What stood out to you about him? Obviously, he's got a little bit of experience under his belt now.
Yeah, DJ's pretty instinctive in there. I think he plays splits really well. He uses his skill set really well. He has really good feet. And when his eyes are in the right place, he's been pretty effective. So we like what we've seen out of DJ. There's still room for growth, obviously, in a bunch of different areas. But I think he's taken the challenge and embraced it well also.
With all the position changes, does it make it hard for you to figure out what you have just yet? Like, depth-wise and kind of the too deep? Like, do you feel like you're going to need summer workouts in the fall to kind of get a feel of, like, what you have on defense yet?
I think that's a good question. I think everything's an evaluation, right? So spring ball is just phase 2. But we still have to go through the summer, still have to go through fall camp to see who we really are and how we're really going to operate as a defense. But we've seen some really promising things from all those guys, and we feel good about the growth that we've made and the direction that we're headed.
With the top three corners, you got experience. What has stood out about that position battle between Breon, Armani, and Dorian?
I think Coach Jones has done a remarkable job with those guys. He's challenged them in a number of ways. Those guys have embraced the challenge, and some have shown up better on some days than others. But what they've done collectively is that each day they've come and attacked and have really made valiant efforts to improve. I mean, that's all you want as a coach, for guys to come and put their best foot forward every day. So I've been really impressed with that mindset and the growth in that area because, frankly, a lot of those guys are skilled, and they have some really good God-given abilities, but it's what you do with those abilities and how you harness that skill set and how you work on your game.
In your room, Jaden Keller's a guy that's pretty young, got a little bit of action last year.
Yeah.
What have you seen out of him in what's his first spring this time around?
So Jaden is a really instinctive guy. Like I was talking about the corners, he has some God-given gifts that he's harnessed and developed in a lot of ways. He still has a lot of room to grow. He's young, so learning the defense, everything's still kind of happening a little fast for him. But one thing I'll tell you about Jaden is that Jaden works at it. And so he's really taken it on himself to be the best player that he can be and has really asked good questions at times. He's starting to put things together, and at each practice you see incremental growth from him. And so that's what I've been pleased with. Not just him in that room, but some other young guys as well. And so I just hope that growth continues.
In terms of game experience, your room probably has more than any other position on the field. How do you like how that group is coming together in terms of depth and just sort of understanding what you're trying to teach?
Yeah, game experience is invaluable, especially at this level, especially in this conference, right? And so that's one thing that I've appreciated about my guys is that they've been able to put things together as we teach them and as we compound on the schemes that we're trying to develop and trying to apply on the field. And so that's been good. Obviously some language is new. Obviously where we might key or where we might align might be a little bit different than what they've done in the past. But that has been extremely valuable. So you brought up a young guy by the name of Jaden Keller, right? Having somebody in the same position room with a Dax, with an Allen Tisdale, with the Keyshawn Artist, I think that really helps him because there are some questions that they might not always want to ask coach, but they can ask one of their peers and feel more comfortable and still will be learning because you're learning from guys who've actually done it in a game situation.
Brent mentioned Josh Fuga as a guy you guys had some difficult conversations with in terms of being honest with him that weren't sure, he was being consistent enough or doing things you wanted, but he's really stepped up the last couple of weeks and really made an impression. Where have you seen his growth and him getting better throughout the last couple of weeks?
One thing we talk about a lot on defense is how us as coaches, we see better than we hear. So we're not really interested in you talking about the work you're going to do or the plays you're going to make. We're going to evaluate you based on what we see in your behavior and how it repeats itself in terms of consistency. And one thing about Fuga is that he's shown us who he wants to become. And he's done it consistently. I mean, this spring he's really jumped out in a number of practices on a number of days in different periods. So it's clear the type of work that he's been putting in and who he wants to become. And again, he has room to grow, right? He hasn't scratched his ceiling at all, but the kid has made phenomenal growth.
And at defensive tackle in general, JC and Brent have mentioned, numbers-wise, you've got some injuries there too. A little bit concerning. Is that the position maybe that stands out the most, where numbers is just it's going to be hard? Or what have you seen from that group, kind of second group, third group?
Yeah. So I think we talked about this last time. I don't think you can ever have too many defensive linemen. So you can always have more defensive linemen. Why? Because every single play, those guys are dealing with some form of contact. They're dealing with compound blocks, whether it's double teams, it's single blocks, double blocks, or having the whole point. Those guys have to take a brunt of the mass from the offense, just in general. So I think you can always have more. But what I have seen is growth with the first group, second group, and third group. We talked about Fuga. He's mostly been running with the ones, but he's grown. He's taken his game up a notch. You can keep going on and on about the guys, especially on the interior, who have really taken on the challenge of rising to the occasion. So they're growing, man.
We're going to talk to Keonta Jenkins in a little bit. I'm just curious. He's got 2 years under his belt, but because of COVID, he's still got 3 years of eligibility left. What have you seen from him on film in the past, and what do you really like about what stood out about him this spring so far?
Yeah, I think we all know Keonta is a really gifted athlete. He's long, he can run, covers ground. The young man used to play on the back end, right? And he is really gifted. One thing that I've noticed about him is that he's starting to become confident and comfortable with who he is as a football player. I think that if you look at the scrimmage from this past Saturday, he was really productive and effective in a lot of things that we were asking him to do. And I think he's becoming more comfortable. The more comfortable you can become as a player in terms of what your coaches are asking you to do, the more you can play with anticipation and more of an attack mindset as opposed to reacting to everything. So he's becoming more comfortable, and it's noticeable from a coaching standpoint.
What have you noticed from C.J. McCray at defensive end? He's a guy, when we've watched open practice, kind of jumped out at us. What have you seen from him?
C.J. flashes big time. I think he's gifted as well, really skilled. The thing that you notice about C.J. a ton, and you may not see it on the field, but off the field, that kid works. He grinds. He wants to be the absolute best that he can be. And so he's asking questions. He's visible in a facility. It's very apparent that he has a desire to be elite in every aspect. So I respect that about that kid, and I expect it to continue.
Anthony. Coach, let's flip the script and say you had to game plan against Virginia Tech. And obviously you will, a little bit on one side this weekend. But what would scare you about the Hokies' offense if you had to game plan?
Yeah, so I think we have threats at a number of different positions, right? And so you have to be mindful of, the deep ball. You got to be mindful of perimeter attacks and how they run the football. I think it's been a focus of ours to make sure that we're balanced offensively, but that also we can attack different players in different areas of the field based on what players they want to utilize. And so, I wouldn't tell you everything that I planned against Coach Tebow, but I'll tell you they've been doing a good job this spring.
For the spring game, Coach Price said you guys are splitting up the roster.
Yep.
Is that sort of how is that done? What do you guys sit down and try to just balance it? Is it numbers? Is it do you want to put guys in certain situations? How do you have those conversations, and what's kind of the goal when you guys are kind of crafting two teams for Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all those things. You want balance, you want numbers from a player safety standpoint to make sure that it's equitable. But ultimately, whoever's out there with whatever group, whatever jersey you have on, you want to see a team to be absolutely competitive and to be in attack mode. So we've sat down and we've talked about who we want where. But ultimately, when you're on the field, you're part of the starting 11. So it's about getting the job done to the best of your ability.
And you can enjoy being opposite Coach Pry. He said you're both calling plays on opposite sides.
We're going to have some fun on Saturday.
Last one back.
Coach, I know this is heading into this weekend. For you personally, how exciting is this going to be, considering the weekend that is ahead of you right now?
Yeah, so before coming to this institution, I did not know the amount of focus, excitement, and love that just goes into this weekend, man. So I'm really pumped. My family is, my wife and daughter. We are really excited about it. I feel like, it's funny because you work all off season in the winter and January and February to get to spring ball, and we've gotten to the last week really pretty quickly. And it feels like this week's going by a little bit fast. And so, man, just taking it a day at a time, enjoying each moment. I'm excited to get around some of the alumni who love this institution. I'm excited to see our players really see the fruits of their labor, man, because what we're asking them to do isn't easy. To go to school, to train the way that we train, to play football and get coached how we coach them and how we love on them, it's not an easy thing to do. So I'm excited to see them in front of their loved ones, you know, seeing the fruits of their labor, man. So it's been good, and so I'm excited about it. Yeah, man.
All right, Coach Quinn up next.
All right, thank you, guys. Have a good day.